The Ural Mountains loomed beneath a veil of winter clouds, their jagged peaks sharp as broken glass. Daniel Carter tightened his scarf and muttered, "The past lingers here like frost." Snow crunched beneath his boots, muffling the silence of an untouched world. Emily Hayes followed a step behind, hesitant, her eyes scanning the endless white expanse. "Are we really chasing ghosts, Daniel?" she asked, her voice brittle. He turned to her, eyes fierce, and replied, "Not ghosts, Emily, truth." The wind howled, as if nature itself resisted their search. In the distance, the trees stood like frozen sentinels, dark outlines against the snow. Each gust cut through their coats, sharp as knives, reminding them this land had claimed lives before. The story of 9 lost souls echoed in Daniel's mind, their names unspoken but ever present. Beneath the endless snow, answers waited. He whispered to himself, "This is where it began, and this is where it will end." The small cabin was dimly lit, its wooden beams creaking against the weight of snow outside. Daniel spread old maps across the table, edges frayed, ink fading. Emily stood near the fire, hesitant but curious. She asked, "Do you believe the officials lied?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I believe they buried the truth." His hands traced the marked trail, his eyes searching for patterns. The flicker of firelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting his intensity. Emily sighed, torn between fear and intrigue. The wind howled beyond the walls, as though echoing the lost voices of the hikers. Daniel whispered, "Every piece matters, Emily. Even what they never wanted us to see." Snow drifted outside the window, masking the world in silence. Emily leaned closer to the maps, pointing at the marked pass. "This trail is cursed," she murmured. Daniel's eyes narrowed, replying, "Curses are born from truth." He unfolded a faded journal, its pages fragile with age. Handwriting scrawled across it like desperate whispers. Emily's breath caught. "Is this one of theirs?" Daniel nodded slowly, reverence in his tone. "Igor Dyatlov's." These words were his last voice. The weight of history pressed against them as the fire crackled, its warmth a fragile shield against the cold mysteries outside. Emily's fingers trembled as she touched the journal, eyes scanning the jagged handwriting. "These words feel like a cry for help," she whispered. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. "It's more than a cry, it's a trail left in ink." He turned the page, revealing sketches of tents, mountains, and notes of strange lights. The room seemed to tighten, the fire snapping with sudden sparks. Emily stepped back, unease rippling through her. "Strange lights? Daniel, this is madness." He met her gaze with unshakable resolve. "Madness is ignoring the truth when it's staring at us." The cabin felt smaller now, filled with the weight of history and unspoken fear. Daniel closed the journal with care, his fingers lingering on its cover. "This is the beginning," he murmured. Emily shook her head, pacing near the fire, torn between belief and disbelief. "You're walking into darkness, Daniel," she said. He replied firmly, "Darkness doesn't frighten me, lies do." The howl of the wind grew louder, rattling the wooden beams, as if nature itself warned them. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, "What if the truth isn't meant to be found?" Daniel's answer came like steel, "Then we'll drag it into the light." The storm had passed, leaving the mountains draped in a silence almost heavier than the wind itself. Daniel Carter adjusted his pack, his eyes sweeping the trail ahead. "This is where they camped last," he said, pointing toward the slope. Emily Hayes followed, her boots sinking into snow with each reluctant step. She asked, "How can you be sure?" Daniel knelt, brushing aside ice to reveal remnants of scorched wood. "Because fire doesn't lie." The evidence was fragile, nearly erased by years of storms, but enough for him to recognize the truth. Emily shivered, more from unease than cold. 9 people died here, Daniel. Doesn't it feel like the mountain still remembers?" He looked up, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The mountain remembers everything." Emily crouched beside Daniel, her breath fogging the air as she studied the blackened wood. This could be from anything, she insisted. Daniel shook his head, his hand tracing the burnt edges. No, this was their fire. It's the same place marked in Dyatlov's notes. The wind stirred loose snow across the clearing, momentarily burying the faint evidence. Emily pressed her lips together, fighting doubt. Then why were they outside, away from their tent? Daniel's jaw set as he rose. That's the question no one ever answered. He glanced at the surrounding forest, its silence too complete, as if it held the answer he sought. The forest seemed to lean closer as they entered, branches heavy with ice. Emily clutched her flashlight, its beam cutting through the dim haze. "Do you ever think we shouldn't be here?" she asked, her voice low. Daniel walked ahead, steady, his breath steaming in the air. "Fear kept the truth buried," he replied. Emily's light flickered across broken branches, twisted unnaturally. "What could have done this?" she whispered. Daniel paused, kneeling to examine deep impressions in the snow, long since frozen into permanence. "Something that doesn't belong here," he said, the words heavy with unease. The silence was broken only by the creak of branches under ice. Daniel brushed his glove across the frozen ground, tracing faint marks. "These aren't natural," he murmured. Emily shifted uneasily, her breath catching. "What if they weren't alone that night?" she asked. Daniel glanced at her, his eyes narrowing. "Then someone, or something, wanted them gone." Emily wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of the forest pressing in. The snow glittered faintly under the beam of her flashlight, as though mocking their search. "Daniel," she whispered, "what if the truth is worse than lies?" He answered with quiet certainty. "It usually is." They emerged from the trees into an open stretch, the wind cutting sharper here. Daniel stopped, staring at the slope above. "This is it," he said. Emily followed his gaze, her breath quickening as she saw the faint outlines of where tents once stood. The site was desolate, only scattered mounds of snow betraying what had been. Emily whispered, "This is where they tore their way out." Daniel stepped closer, the snow crunching underfoot like brittle bones. He lowered his voice, almost reverent. 9 lives ended here, and yet no answers remain. Emily's eyes glistened in the cold light. "Maybe the answers don't want to be found." Daniel's reply came cold as the wind. "Then we'll dig them up." The archives smelled of dust and secrecy, a place where forgotten truths slept. Daniel Carter pulled a file box from a rusted shelf, its label faded with age. Emily Hayes trailed behind, hesitant, whispering, "Are we even allowed in here?" Daniel's jaw clenched as he flipped the lid open. "Permission is for those who want silence," he muttered. Inside lay weathered reports, brittle photographs, and handwritten testimonies. Emily lifted one picture, black and white, showing the hiker's tent shredded. Her voice shook. "It looks like they fled in terror." Daniel's eyes narrowed as he leaned closer. "And no one ever told us what drove them into the dark." The shadows in the room seemed to thicken with every word, as if the secrets did not want to be touched. Daniel spread the photographs across the table, the grainy images painting a story of fear and confusion. "Look at the angles of the cuts," he said, pointing to the ruined tent. Emily frowned, leaning closer, her fingers tracing the torn fabric in the photo. "From the inside," she whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. "They cut their way out." Emily stepped back, her hand covering her mouth. "Who does that unless they're desperate?" Daniel's voice hardened. "Desperation is truth carved into canvas." The silence pressed in as the sound of wind rattled the window. Emily whispered, "Maybe some mysteries don't want to be solved." Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the evidence. Then, this one picked the wrong man to hide from. Emily turned over a folder, its paper brittle and yellowed. A typed report slid out, stamped with red ink, classified. Her pulse quickened. "Daniel, this was never meant for public eyes." He scanned the pages, jaw tightening. "Reports of strange lights in the sky," he read aloud. Emily's eyes widened. "Lights? You think they saw something out here?" Daniel's tone was sharp. "Not think, I know." He pointed at a testimony scribbled in the margins, barely legible. Glowing orbs over the ridge. Emily shook her head, uneasy. That sounds like paranoia. Daniel's eyes gleamed with intensity. Paranoia doesn't leave scorch marks in the snow. The overhead light flickered, casting shifting shadows across the records. Emily stepped closer to Daniel, lowering her voice. If these documents are real, someone tried very hard to bury them. Daniel smirked bitterly, tapping the stamp. Burying truth is easier than explaining it. Emily frowned, her brow furrowed. But why? What did they see that terrified them so much? Daniel gathered the scattered papers, his eyes burning with purpose. That's what we'll find out. The tension in the room seemed to vibrate, as though even the walls remembered the weight of secrets. Emily whispered, "Secrets like this don't stay hidden without reason." Daniel's reply was cold, unyielding. "And they don't stay hidden forever." Emily hugged her coat tighter, her voice trembling. "Daniel, if we keep going, we'll be crossing a line that others died to protect." Daniel set the papers down, staring at her. "Lines don't stop truth, Emily. They mark where it begins." She shook her head, torn between fear and loyalty. "You're obsessed," she whispered. Daniel's gaze softened for the briefest moment before hardening again. Obsession is just persistence in the face of silence. The air in the room thickened, as if every secret hidden in those dusty files was leaning in to listen. Emily turned toward the window, where snow fell silently outside. "Then I hope the silence doesn't consume us." The cafe in Yekaterinburg buzzed faintly with quiet chatter, but Daniel Carter kept his voice low. Across the table sat Richard Moore, his supposed ally, calm and persuasive. "You're chasing shadows," Richard said, smiling faintly. Emily Hayes stirred her tea, watching uneasily. Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Shadows don't tear tents apart." Richard's gaze held steady, his voice smooth as glass. "Some mysteries are better left untouched." Emily glanced between them, feeling the tension coil like a wire. Daniel's tone hardened. "Or maybe someone's protecting more than mystery." For the first time, Richard's smile faltered, just slightly, before he recovered. The air between them grew heavy, and Emily whispered, "Daniel, maybe we should leave." Outside, the snow drifted across the streets as Daniel walked quickly, Emily close behind. "You don't trust him," she said, her breath visible in the cold. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Richard knows more than he admits." Emily frowned, pulling her coat tighter. "Then why help us at all?" Daniel stopped, turning to face her, his eyes fierce. "Because keeping us close means he controls what we find." Emily shivered, realizing the danger. "He's playing both sides," she whispered. Daniel nodded grimly, scanning the streetlights that flickered against the falling snow. "And sooner or later, he'll show which side he belongs to." The next evening, Richard invited them to a private office lined with books and leather chairs. Emily hesitated by the door, whispering, "This feels wrong." Daniel stepped inside without pause, his eyes scanning shelves of classified reports. Richard appeared behind them, voice smooth. "I brought you here to show you what few have seen." He placed a folder on the desk, its cover stamped "Restricted." Daniel opened it, revealing photographs of the hikers' bodies, their injuries brutal and unexplained. Emily gasped, her hand trembling. Richard's voice lowered. "You see now why the truth can't be spoken aloud." Daniel's glare hardened. "Or why it must be." Emily clutched the edge of the desk, her eyes fixed on the disturbing images. "These wounds, they don't make sense," she whispered. Daniel studied them closely, voice steady. Crushed ribs, missing eyes. No avalanche did this. Richard's face remained unreadable. "Speculation leads nowhere," he said coolly. Daniel snapped his gaze up. "Speculation is all we've been fed while truth rots in locked rooms." Emily's voice cracked. "Then why show us this, Richard?" For a heartbeat, his mask slipped, and there was something almost pitying in his eyes. "Because you once stopped searching," he murmured. Daniel's voice was cold steel. "You're right about that." The silence stretched as Richard leaned back, his expression unreadable. "You don't understand the cost of answers," he said softly. Daniel's eyes burned. "And you don't understand the cost of silence." Emily's voice trembled. "Both cost lives." Richard's calm broke, his voice sharp now. "If you dig deeper, you'll join them." Daniel rose slowly, folding the photographs back into the folder. "Threats won't bury truth, Richard." For the first time, Richard's composure cracked, his jaw tightening. Emily's heart pounded as Daniel stepped toward the door. He paused only long enough to say, "If you're in the way, we'll treat you like the mountain itself." The train rocked gently as it cut across the frozen landscape, its windows rattling with each gust. Daniel Carter sat hunched over the restricted folder, his face lit by the pale glow of a reading lamp. Emily Hayes sat beside him, voice hushed. Richard wasn't warning us. He was threatening us. Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's part of something bigger." Emily glanced nervously around the cabin, lowering her voice further. "Then we're being watched." Daniel's eyes flicked to the corridor beyond the glass, where a shadow lingered too long before moving away. "They're already watching," he whispered. The sound of wheels on steel grew louder, as though echoing his certainty. Emily pressed closer to the window, the snowy wilderness racing by outside. "Why hide the truth this long?" she asked. Daniel leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Because it wasn't just 9 hikers who vanished. It was control of a story no one was allowed to tell." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean government cover-ups?" Daniel nodded grimly. "When fear serves power, lies become law." A sudden knock rattled the door of their compartment, and Emily jumped. Daniel reached instinctively for his pack, his voice low. "Stay calm." The knock came again, slow and deliberate, as if testing their nerves. The compartment doors slid open with a metallic groan. A stranger entered, tall and broad-shouldered, his coat dusted with snow. He offered a thin smile. "Evening." Daniel's hand stayed on his pack, his tone measured. "Do we know you?" The man's eyes lingered on the folder. "Knowledge is dangerous on this route." Emily's pulse quickened, her voice trembling. "Who sent you?" The man ignored her, his smile fading into steel. Daniel leaned forward, unflinching. "If you were here to scare us, you'll have to do better." Silence pressed in before the man finally muttered, "Some truths will bury you." Then he turned and stepped back into the corridor. The door clicked shut, leaving only the hum of the train. Emily exhaled shakily. "Daniel, this is bigger than we imagined." He gathered the folder quickly, his voice steady. "We've crossed into their territory." Emily's brow furrowed. "Then every step forward puts us in their crosshairs." Daniel glanced out the window, where the night blurred past in streaks of white and gray. "Good. Let them watch. Every secret they hide is another piece of proof." Emily touched his arm, her eyes full of worry. "And if they try to silence us?" His reply came sharp, like steel against flint. "Then they prove us right." Hours later, the train screeched into a remote station blanketed in snow. Daniel stepped onto the icy platform, his breath misting in the bitter air. Emily followed, clutching her coat tightly. "Where now?" she asked. Daniel scanned the darkened buildings, lights flickering dimly in the distance. "To the only man who still talks about the night the hikers died." Emily's eyes widened. "Sergei Ivanov? The old informant?" Daniel nodded. "If anyone knows what's buried, it's him." The sound of boots echoed behind them, too close to be coincidence. Emily whispered urgently, "Daniel, we're not alone." His hand clenched into a fist. "We were never alone." The cabin at the edge of the village creaked under the weight of decades. Inside, Sergei Ivanov sat hunched by the fire, his eyes clouded by age yet sharp with memory. Daniel Carter leaned forward. "You were there when they found them," he said. Sergei's hands shook as he lit his pipe. "I saw what was not meant for men to see." Emily Hayes exchanged a glance with Daniel, her voice soft. "What do you mean?" Sergei's tone cracked with bitterness. "Their bodies were broken, but not by snow. Something pressed down on them, like the mountain itself turned against them. Daniel's breath slowed, sensing the weight of every word. "Tell us everything," he urged. Sergei drew a deep breath, smoke curling in the dim light. They fled their tent barefoot, half-dressed, as though chased by fire in the sky. Emily's face blanched, whispering, "Lights?" Sergei nodded grimly. Blue spheres, silent and merciless. They burned the snow but left no ash. Daniel gripped the edge of his chair, his voice tight. "And the officials?" Sergei spat into the fire. "They forced silence. They said avalanche. They said madness. Lies." Emily shivered, clutching her coat tighter. "Why keep it buried?" Sergei's gaze turned hollow. "Because admitting it meant admitting we are not in control." Daniel spread the photographs across the table before Sergei. "These injuries? Ribs crushed, skulls fractured. Could orbs do this?" Sergei's expression darkened. They pressed the air itself against them like unseen fists. Emily whispered, "And the missing eyes? The tongue?" Sergei looked into the fire, voice trembling. "The mountain took its payment. Some things, beyond flesh." Daniel leaned closer, unwilling to blink. "And you saw it?" Sergei nodded once, his hands shaking. "I saw the lights dance above the ridge. I felt their silence inside my bones. It has never left me." Emily drew back, her fear now undeniable. Emily's voice cracked. "If you saw all this, why speak now after years of silence?" Sergei looked at her with sorrow. "Because I am dying, and secrets outlive men." Daniel's tone was cold. "Then tell us who silenced you." Sergei's eyes narrowed. "Men in uniforms. They came the day after we brought the bodies back. They burned reports, erased words. They said the pass itself would be sealed by silence." Emily trembled, whispering, "How many knew?" Sergei's lips curled bitterly. "Too many to speak, too few with courage." Daniel's stare hardened. "Courage isn't optional anymore." The fire cracked loudly, echoing the weight of Sergei's words. "They'll come for you," he warned, his voice a rasp. Daniel stood slowly, gripping the folder tighter. "Let them come. Silence has ruled long enough." Emily looked at Daniel, her eyes wide with both fear and loyalty. "We can't outrun them, Daniel." He turned to her, his voice steady. "We don't run. We expose." Sergei coughed harshly, whispering, "If you want truth, follow the ridge. The mountain will show you what the men tried to hide." Daniel's eyes locked on Sergei, his reply like iron. "Then that's where we go." The ridge loomed like a jagged scar against the night sky. Daniel Carter trudged upward, snow whipping into his face, his breath harsh and uneven. Emily Hayes followed close, her flashlight trembling in her grip. "This is where Sergei said it happened," she whispered. Daniel's voice cut through the wind. "This is where everything ends." Ahead, faint blue lights flickered between the trees, shifting like silent flames. Emily's heart pounded. "Do you see that?" Daniel steadied his steps, his eyes locked. Yes, and so did they. The storm howled, carrying with it the weight of the dead. The truth was waiting in the snow. The lights grew closer, hovering above the ridge in silence. Emily's voice cracked. "Daniel, they're moving." He raised his hand, stopping her. "Don't look away." The snow glowed faintly beneath the orbs, casting shifting shadows across the slope. Emily clutched his arm. "This is what killed them," she said, terror rising. Daniel's voice was steady but sharp. "And this is what they hid." The orbs pulsed once, bright enough to sting their eyes. Emily gasped. "Why are they here now?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because we are." His words vanished into the storm, but the lights seemed to answer, circling slowly like predators. A sudden crunch of snow behind them made Emily spin. Richard Moore emerged from the shadows, his dark coat whipping in the wind. "I told you not to come here," he shouted over the storm. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And yet here you are." Richard's expression cracked with desperation. "You think you want answers, but truth kills more than lies ever could." Emily's breath caught. "You knew all along," she whispered. Richard's voice was pained. I tried to protect you, but the mountain doesn't let go once you call its name. The orbs pulsed brighter, as if feeding on the tension. Daniel stepped forward. Then let it take me, but not the truth. The wind roared as Richard stepped closer, his eyes wild. You don't understand. These things don't just kill, they consume. Daniel's voice cut like steel. Then why protect them? Richard's face twisted. Because the world isn't ready for this. Emily's voice shook. And 9 hikers were the cost? Richard faltered, pain in his eyes. I didn't want this. The orb surged suddenly, light flaring bright against the snow. Emily shielded her eyes, crying out. Daniel stood firm, staring into the blaze. Truth doesn't wait for readiness, he said. Richard's voice broke. Then you'll die like they did. The ridge exploded in light as the orbs descended, wind shrieking like a chorus of the dead. Daniel shouted above the storm. This is their truth. Emily clung to him, her eyes wide with terror. Richard fell to his knees, screaming, You don't know what you've unleashed. The snow around them shimmered, revealing faint outlines of figures, 9 shadows frozen in eternal fear. Emily whispered, The hikers. Daniel's voice trembled but held firm. Their silence ends tonight. He raised the folder high, pages scattering into the storm. The orbs pulsed once, then vanished, leaving only darkness. The mountain stood quiet again, but the truth was no longer buried.